He brought her home on New Year's Eve, while I was still cooking dinner for his family. She was pregnant. He handed me divorce papers like it was a business deal. Said nothing. Not even sorry. I walked out that night, pregnant, humiliated, forgotten. Now the world calls me Pear. And him? He calls my name in his nightmares. New Year's Eve always had a certain kind of magic. Crackling fireplaces, champagne flutes, glittery resolutions that nobody keeps. But that year my kitchen smelled like betrayal disguised as cinnamon and roast duck. I was elbow deep in helping our house staff prepare the holiday dinner, my fingers expertly folding napkins while my pregnant belly made everything feel like an Olympic sport. Still, I wasn't the type to sit still and rest. That wasn't me. Never had been. "Emily, please," Maria, our longtime cook, fretted. "At least sit while we do the carving." "I'm pregnant, not porcelain," I said, smirking as I adjusted the cheese platter. "Besides, the duck looks scared. Let me finish what I started." Laughter bubbled up around me. I had always made this house feel alive. The warmth, the rhythm, the little traditions. Those were mine. Then the door opened. And Death walked in wearing Armani and lipstick. Ethan Carter, husband, CO trader, strode into my kitchen with another woman at his side. She wasn't just any woman. She was Isabelle Lawson. Former intern. Current snake. Also inconveniently pregnant. The warmth died so fast the room might as well have dropped 10 degrees. Isabelle gave a tight, practiced smile. She looked like a walking campaign ad for smugness. Hair in cascading curls, hand on her hip, belly on full display like some kind of trophy. I didn't move. I didn't speak. The staff exchanged frozen glances. Maria's carving knife hovered midair like she was deciding between slicing duck or Ethan's jugular. Then Ethan, casual as ever, said to the staff, "You can all head home. Go enjoy the holiday with your families. Come back after the new year." Maria blinked. "Sir, but the food." He didn't even look at her. "It's fine. You were only supposed to stay until the meal was finished." No one argued. They filed out, awkward and wide-eyed like students caught watching a fight in the hallway. I, however, was not moving an inch. Isabelle had the audacity to grin at me like we were about to swap dessert recipes. "Nice spread," she said, eyeing the table. "Very domestic." I ignored her. Turned to Ethan. "So this is how we're doing it. No phone call? Just a dramatic entrance and a home-wrecking side dish." He didn't blink. "We need to talk." "No kidding," I said. "Let me guess. You want to name the baby after yourself too?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a thick folder from the inside of his coat and laid it on the island between us like it was an olive branch. "This is a divorce agreement." My hand twitched, but I didn't reach for it. Wow. Nothing says, "Happy New Year," like a legally binding insult. He straightened his spine, always the business executive. "Isabelle's pregnant and I can't let her child be born without a name or status. Let's finalize the divorce first. We'll remarry once everything is in order." It was like listening to someone explain the weather. So clinical. So logical. So disgusting. I opened the folder. No property division. No support. No assets. Nothing. Clean cut. "You know," I said, flipping pages, "you could have at least had the decency to pretend to be generous." He sighed like I was the one inconveniencing him. "Since we're remarrying eventually, there's no point in the hassle of splitting assets." Isabelle leaned on the counter like it was her kitchen. "That's what I told him. It's all just paperwork, right? We don't need to overcomplicate things." I looked at her, then back at Ethan. "So what is this? An installment plan for betrayal? You trade me in for a newer model and expect me to wait in the driveway until your baby gets a monogrammed onesie?" "Emily," he said with that patronizing tone that used to work on me, "it's just temporary." I snorted. "You know what else was supposed to be temporary? Acne. But here you are." Her smugness curled around her lips. "We just didn't want to make things harder on you. That's all." "Oh, darling," I said sweetly. "You think this is the hard part?" Then, without flinching, I grabbed a pen from the counter, flipped to the last page and signed my name in big, unapologetic cursive. "Voila," I said, sliding it back to Ethan. "Congratulations. You're officially scum." "You'll be back," he said ever so confidently. "You just need time to think." I smiled. "Don't flatter yourself, Ethan. I don't need time. I need a match and some lighter fluid. I turned on my heel and walked out of the kitchen, the divorce agreement clutched in my hand like a trophy. My heels clicked against the marble with righteous echo. As I passed the grand hallway, I heard Isabelle's voice behind me whispering, "She's not going to do anything crazy, right?" Ethan's answer came like the hum of a smug lullaby. "No. She's not going anywhere." "Oh, but darling, you're about to learn something new about me." I took my time walking through the house. Past the grand chandelier he said reminded him of our honeymoon in Vienna. Past the art gallery where I used to display my designs, the same ones he told me to stop wasting time on. Past the master staircase where he once carried me after our wedding reception and said, "This is forever." Funny. That word doesn't age well. When I reached the front door I paused. This wasn't the way I wanted the year to end. It wasn't the way I planned to leave. But it was the moment fate handed me the pen and said rewrite everything. And I would. Not as Mrs. Ethan Carter. But as Emily. Full stop. Period. Bold font. Underlined. As the cold air hit my face and the heavy villa doors shut behind me I finally exhaled. The silence wasn't empty. It was power. I had no plan. No suitcase. No guarantees. But I had my name. And I had fire. Let them think I'd cry. Let them think I'd crawl back. Let them sip wine and toast to their pathetic little victory. Because what they didn't know was, queens don't return to ashes. They rebuild kingdoms. Hospitals have a particular kind of stillness. Not peace. Not calm. Just sterile silence. The kind that creeps into your bones and whispers, "You don't belong here, but you're not leaving whole either." I sat on the edge of the examination bed, my coat still draped over my lap. My hands rested on the slight roundness of my belly, the only thing that had offered me comfort during the nightmare Ethan Carter called a marriage. Till now. The doctor stood in front of me, clipboard in hand, expression lined with careful empathy. He looked like he'd done this 1,000 times. I guess I looked like I was going to be the 1,001st. "You're 20 weeks along," he said softly. "This won't be a simple procedure." "I'm aware," I said. He hesitated. "You're absolutely sure?" "Well, of course I wasn't. Whoever is sitting in this room. But certainty doesn't always arrive with clarity. Sometimes it's born from destruction. From betrayal so deep you know bringing a child into that mess would be an act of cruelty, not love. I pressed a hand against my stomach. Would he grow up to become like Ethan? Cold. Calculated. Smiling when he lies and lying when he smiles. Would I raise a son only to hear him one day tell a woman carrying his child that remarrying later is more convenient than dividing assets now? I couldn't stomach it. Not again. Not in another lifetime. Not through another generation. I nodded. Do whatever it takes. They admitted me that night. The first dose of medication came within the hour. The nurses were gentle. The pain wasn't. Late-term abortions are a violent contradiction. Too late to be abstract, too early to be closure. I felt everything. The twisting. The breaking. The loss. I screamed into the pillow so no one else would hear. I didn't cry for the baby. I cried for the version of me that once believed Ethan Carter would never betray me. That young, naive, hopeful woman. I delivered her that night too. I spent 7 days in that sterile room. Every sunrise came through the window like a slap. Nurses tiptoed in and out, voices hushed, sympathy stitched into every word. I hated it. One nurse on the 3rd night tried to place her hand on mine. "It gets easier," she whispered. I pulled my hand away. Not for women like me. Because women like me didn't get to grieve in public. We didn't get casseroles and sympathy cards. We got headlines, whisper campaigns, and mistresses who smirked through our ashes. After discharge, I checked into a postpartum recovery center. Private. Isolated. No press. No calls. No pity. The center was luxurious. Overpriced sheets, ocean views, and daily herbal tonics I didn't ask for. But for the first time in years I slept without surveillance. No one knew me here. Not as Emily Carter. Not as Ethan's wife. Not even as the woman who had just chosen to end her own motherhood. They called me Mizelle. I let them. I spent the days in silence. Reading. Sleeping. Floating. But silence has its limits. By the 2nd week my fingers twitched for a pencil. Before Ethan I was a designer. I went to one of the top design schools in the country. By 25, I had already done campaign work for 3 international brands. I wasn't a hobbyist. I was a powerhouse, until Ethan convinced me otherwise. "Why would the wife of a CEO work?" he once asked, sipping scotch. "It looks desperate." So I quit. And he applauded. What he didn't know, what he never bothered to ask, was that I quietly signed up for global freelance platforms under the alias Pear. Simple. Elegant. Anonymous. I took projects on the side. Late at night. Quietly. While he slept next to me thinking I was reading romance novels, I was designing bestsellers for Italian jewelry houses and Parisian boutiques. He thought I was dependent on him. He had no idea I was earning triple what he gave me in allowance, with clients who praised my vision in broken English and PayPal notes. He thought he left me with nothing. But I left him with everything he thought he owned, including his ego. Midway through my stay, I received an email from my platform. "Dear Pear, a new project inquiry has been submitted by Anderson Corporation. Please review the brief and proposed budget." I stared at it for a full minute. Anderson Corp. Ethan's pride and joy. His inheritance. His identity. And the irony? He was now reaching out, unknowingly, to the woman he left in the cold. I didn't respond. Not yet. 3 weeks into recovery, my phone buzzed again. It was from Ethan. A message. Then another. Then photos. The first was of our signed divorce certificate. Formal. Dry. Stamped. The second. A marriage certificate. Ethan Carter and Isabelle Lawson. And just below it a message that read, "Now that it's done, maybe you can stop sulking and come home. I still want you in my life. Behave and I'll treat you well." I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before blocking the number. Then I stood up, walked over to the nurse's desk and said, "I'd like a new number. And a new phone. I'll pay extra if they can make sure it's untraceable." The woman blinked. "Of course, ma'am." I changed everything. SIM card, device, app accounts, even my delivery address for the freelance platform. My former social media was deleted. Every email tied to Emily Carter was erased. I didn't want a trace of her to remain. Emily Carter had disappeared. Let them think I was broken. Hiding. Taking time to think. Let Ethan believe I'd come crawling back once my money ran out and reality slapped me across the face. But reality wasn't the one getting slapped. I was gone. My divorce certificate arrived at a secure pickup station a few days later. I went in wearing sunglasses and a scarf, not because anyone would recognize me, but because it made the anonymity sweeter. The clerk smiled politely. "Delivery for Ms. L?" I nodded, signed, and left without saying another word. I walked down the street holding the envelope and smiled for the first time in weeks. I wasn't Ethan's wife anymore. I wasn't pregnant. I wasn't trapped. I was free. And the woman who walks away with nothing is often the one who comes back with everything. They say when a woman disappears, it's either to heal or to prepare for war. I did both. The taxi curved along the coast of Haichong, the ocean stretching out like a silver blade under a slate-gray sky. It was quiet, remote, and so far removed from Ethan Carter's glass empire that it felt like I was stepping onto another planet. I liked that. The house I bought sat nestled on a cliff above the water. Minimalist architecture, all clean lines and massive windows, like a breathing canvas with a front row seat to the sea. It wasn't grand in the way Ethan's estate had been. It wasn't marble floors and gold fixtures. But it was mine. No footsteps down the hall. No perfume trails from someone else's mistress. No boardroom calls bleeding into bedtime. Just peace. I stood barefoot in the unfurnished living room and let the salty air wrap around me like an old friend. "I'm home," I whispered. Not to anyone. Just to the version of me I buried long ago. Within days, I had transformed one of the sunlit back rooms into a design studio. Sketchbooks lined the table. Fabric swatches spilled from drawers. Colored pencils, gold leaf markers, gemstone samplers. I unpacked them all like sacred tools from a life I was finally ready to reclaim. No more pretending. No more hiding behind the label of CEO's wife. I was Pear now. Fully. Unapologetically. I logged into my freelance account with freshly encrypted credentials and was instantly greeted by a queue of new project requests. France. Italy. Dubai. Everyone wanted a piece of Pear's aesthetic this season. I opened a fresh sketchbook, tied my hair into a low bun, and let my fingers take the lead. My lines were sharper now. Bolder. More dangerous. Like me. A few mornings later, while I was making coffee in my silk robe and fuzzy socks, an email pinged. Subject line: Design Collaboration Inquiry, Anderson Corporation. I blinked once. Then smiled. Not a warm smile. A slow, delicious one. Oh, sweet poetic justice. It had finally arrived. The message was formal. Sterile. Our new creative director would like to partner with you for the spring jewelry line. We are open to terms and would appreciate your availability. No mention of who the director was. They didn't need to. I already knew. Only Isabelle Lawson could take over a throne built on manipulation and glitter glue. And clearly, she'd realized that fancy offices and pregnancy belly photoshoots weren't enough to convince the market she had actual taste. She needed Pear. The irony? She already had me once. She just didn't recognize the gift she was smirking in the face of. I didn't reply right away. Let her sweat. Instead, I updated my designer profile with a note. Due to increased demand, all new contracts begin at 10x previous project rate. No exceptions. All communication must be done through platform channels. Full payment up front. No refunds. Within an hour, a second email arrived. Order. Harper. Miss Pear, we are happy to proceed. Please share payment details. Of course you are, Isabelle. Desperation has always been your brand. I crafted a polished contract with every term airtight. No direct communication. No real name disclosures. Full payment before submission. A client waives refund rights. Isabelle signed instantly. And just like that, Ethan's precious company, his new wife's pride and joy, was back in my hands. Only this time I was holding the pen. Once the payment hit my account and cleared all platform checkpoints, I opened the brief. It was pitiful. Amateur sketches. Overused motifs. A spring goddess theme that looked like it had been stolen from a teenage Pinterest board. Isabelle had no idea how to conceptualize high fashion. Just because you can wear couture doesn't mean you understand it. But I did. Because I built it. So I rolled up my sleeves and reimagined everything. Soft golds and ocean sapphires. Clean silhouettes with a twist of rebellion. Necklaces that whispered elegance but screamed power. Rings that caught light like revenge in the sun. By the time I submitted the final designs, I had created a collection fit for a goddess. Not one that wore stilettos to hospital rooms and smiled over someone else's broken vows. The feedback came quickly. We're stunned. These are exquisite. We'd like to lock in future seasons. I replied professionally. Due to platform restrictions, all future inquiries must be resubmitted with updated pricing. Let's see how many zeros you're willing to write just to pretend you have talent, Isabelle. He tried to reach me. Twice. The platform flagged both attempts. Client requested off-platform contact. Request denied per policy. He was spiraling. I could taste it. And it only got better when she messaged under a different alias, thinking I wouldn't notice, and begged for exclusive rights to all future designs. I declined, of course. Not with words. With silence. And silence, when weaponized correctly, is louder than any scream. What Ethan didn't realize was this. He thought he'd discarded a liability. But I had been the engine under the hood the entire time. I wasn't the accessory to his empire. I was the architect. No. He would pay tenfold to hire the same woman he thought he left with nothing. One morning, after delivering a second round of flawless renderings, I sat on the balcony of my villa with a glass of white wine and watched the tide roll in. The sun painted streaks of gold across the waves. The air smelled like salt and clean starts. And just as I leaned back in my chair, my phone buzzed again. A new message from the platform. The creative director has requested an emergency video call to discuss the upcoming product launch. I laughed. A real one. Then I typed. Unavailable. If urgent, please submit your notes in writing through the platform. And just like that, I went back to sketching. Unbothered. Untraceable. Unmatched. I hadn't spoken to another human face-to-face in days, and honestly, it was bliss. I spent my mornings sketching designs that made global luxury houses weep, and my evenings wrapped in cashmere throws, sipping wine as the waves slapped the Haichong cliffs in applause. But then one particular morning, just as I was trimming rosemary in the garden, I heard the deep purr of an engine next door. A black vintage Aston Martin glided into the adjacent villa's driveway. Out stepped a man in tailored linen slacks, sunglasses, and a relaxed confidence that practically made the sea wind pause. He glanced over, caught me mid-trim, and gave the kind of smile women write poetry about. "Neighbor," he said with a nod. "Finally. I thought this coastline was all recluses and billionaires." I raised a brow. "And you are?" "Both," he replied with a grin, extending a hand. "Damian Price." Damian was annoyingly charming. The kind of man who didn't just own wealth, he wore it like cologne. It didn't reek. Lingered. He owned an international luxury property firm and apparently spent half the year in Monaco. The other half, here in Haichong, next to the woman formerly known as Ethan Carter's wife. We shared a glass of wine on the patio later that week. While he brought the bottle, I brought the sarcasm. "You're not exactly the typical seaside retiree," he said, swirling his glass. "Neither are you," I replied. "But I'm here to rest." He tilted his head. "And run from something?" I smirked. "No. I already outran it." It was 2 days later when he knocked on my door again. "I'm throwing a little gathering on Saturday," Damian said, holding a tray of pistachio croissants like a bribe. "Nothing wild. 5 or 6 people. Wine, jazz, discreet gossip. You should come." I hesitated. The last time I was at a party, I left with a divorce folder and emotional whiplash. He noticed. "You won't have to speak. You can pretend to be my bored housekeeper if you want." I laughed. Tempting. He raised a brow. "Do it. I dare you. Come barefoot and sarcastic." "Fine," I said. "But if someone spills red wine, I'm not cleaning it." Saturday night arrived and I kept my word. I wore a simple black wrap dress, tied my hair up, and slid on flat sandals. I greeted Damian's guests at the door with a neutral nod and held a tray of canapés like a seasoned staffer. I moved through the crowd like wallpaper, unseen, quiet, and thoroughly entertained. Damian winked at me now and then as he did his social butterfly routine. His guests were mostly international investors and old money elites who kept their laughter soft and their watches louder. Everything was smooth until the door opened. And in walked Isabelle. On Ethan's arm. My breath caught, but not because I was shaken. Because I hadn't seen either of them in person since the night they ruined my New Year's Eve. The last time I'd seen Ethan, he was standing beside his mistress, divorce contract in hand, sending the help away so he could dump his pregnant wife. No. Here they were again. Except I wasn't pregnant. And I wasn't his anymore. I straightened my back and resumed circulating with the canapés. Isabelle caught sight of me first. Her smile faltered for half a second before she whispered something to Ethan. He turned, searching the room. His eyes landed on me and widened. I looked him dead in the eye, lifted a brow, and offered him a crab tartlet. He didn't take it. Shame. They were actually good. Isabelle looked rattled. "That woman," she hissed under her breath to Ethan. "She looks like—" "I know who she looks like," Ethan replied tightly. I didn't stay to hear the rest. Instead, I approached Damian, lowered my tray, and whispered, code red. "Your guests include 2 cockroaches from my past." He blinked. "Want me to throw them out?" "No," I said with a smile. "Let them sit with their discomfort. But, play along." Damian's lips curled. "Pie housekeeper, right?" "Correct," I said. "And don't flirt too much. I charge overtime." He chuckled. "Noted." Ethan approached about 15 minutes later. His usual swagger was absent, replaced with a careful uncertainty. As if the woman standing before him, barefoot with a silver tray, couldn't possibly be his Emily. "Emily," he said lowly, jaw clenched. I tilted my head. "Sorry, I think you've mistaken me for someone else." He blinked. "You're not?" "Housekeeper," I said sweetly, brushing imaginary crumbs off my dress. "I believe you're looking for the guest list." Damian joined me, slinging a casual arm over my shoulder. "Everything all right?" he asked Ethan, voice all politeness and ice. Ethan's brows furrowed. "This is your housekeeper?" "Yes," Damian said, squeezing my shoulder. "But she's a little more talented than average. Cooks, cleans, designs, flirts." I winked up at him. "All for a modest salary." Ethan stared at me, and I could practically see the questions blaring behind his eyes. How was I here? Why wasn't I broken? Where had I been? And most importantly, How the hell did I disappear so completely? Isabelle stepped forward next, her mouth twitching into that half-forced grin she probably practiced in the mirror. You look different, she said, eyes flickering over my outfit. Housekeeping keeps you humble, I replied brightly. You should try it sometime. Damian stifled a laugh. She cleared her throat. I hope you've found peace. Oh, I have, I said, locking eyes with her. Every day I wake up not married to your husband is a peaceful one. Her smile dropped. I turned away before she could collect herself. The rest of the night Ethan barely mingled. His eyes kept darting toward me from across the room. His grip on his drink was tense. His knuckles white. He expected a tearful scene. A confrontation. A woman who'd come crawling back. But I didn't give him that. I gave him silence. Indifference. The same kind he once threw at me when I stood in his office, pregnant and begging for clarity. Let him eat that now. The party dwindled. As guests trickled out, Damian joined me in the kitchen where I was rinsing out champagne flutes. You handled that like a queen, he said. I'm not a queen, I replied. He looked me over, eyes warm. No. You're worse. I arched a brow. Worse. He smiled. You're the ghost that haunts men like him. That night I stood on my balcony, the sea wind whipping through my hair. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. No message. Then a second buzz. A screenshot of our old wedding photo. I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked the number and poured myself another glass of wine. Let Ethan Carter spiral. Let Isabelle stew. Let the world wonder where Emily Carter went. Because the woman I used to be was gone. And the one replacing her? She was no housekeeper. She was the storm. It happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are supposed to be boring. Nothing exciting ever happens on a Tuesday. But fate's petty like that. I was at the Coastal Arts District in Haichong, where a local gallery had just unveiled their spring design installations. One of my pieces, an ethereal diamond cuff inspired by sea foam and grief, was quietly on display under the anonymous credit, Pear. I was wearing ivory wide-leg trousers, a fitted blazer, and strappy heels that clicked authoritatively against the marble floors. No longer a housekeeper. No longer a wife. No longer anyone's anything. Then I heard it. His voice. Emily. I turned. Ethan Carter stood beneath the soft gallery lights, looking less like the titan of an empire and more like a man who'd misplaced his soul. His tie was loose. His eyes bloodshot. And his temper, clearly on a short leash. I gave him one slow, bored look. Did you take a wrong turn on your way to hell? He marched toward me. We need to talk. I don't talk to strangers. His nostrils flared. Cut the act. You think disappearing makes you powerful? I raised a brow. It makes me peaceful. You should try it. You're selling jewelry now? He gestured at the display wall. That's what you ran off to do. Sketch rocks and play dress up. I smiled coldly. At least I didn't play house with someone else's husband. His voice dropped. Your work is overrated. I tilted my head. And yet companies pay a fortune for it. People had begun to glance in our direction. Murmurs rising. Ethan either didn't care or was too far gone to notice. You don't get to walk away, he growled. You don't get to vanish without an explanation. Without telling me what happened to my child. That stopped everything. The buzz. The whispers. The background music. Even my heartbeat. He stepped closer. Where's my child, Emily? I stared at him for 3 long seconds. Then I slapped him. Hard. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. He stumbled back, clutching his cheek in disbelief. Then I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. Instead I said, clear, cold, and unapologetic. Gone. For a moment no one moved. The entire gallery stood suspended in awkward, stunned silence. The woman with the wine glass. The curator near the sculpture. Even the security guard near the exit. Gone. Ethan echoed, his voice hoarse. Yes, I replied, spine straight. I lost the baby. Alone. In a hospital you never cared to visit. While you were busy marrying the woman you cheated with. From the back of the room came a stifled gasp. Isabelle. She had followed him in, apparently. I hadn't noticed. She stood near the archway, trembling, hands clutching the edge of her silk dress. Then she collapsed. Like a puppet whose strings had just snapped. Her body hit the floor with a thud. Gasps followed. Someone shouted for help. But I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Let her have her dramatic faint. Let her shake the walls with it. When I was bleeding, she was picking out bridal shoes. When I was burying dreams, she was curating centerpieces. Let her lie on that cold floor now. It suited her. Ethan rushed to her side, but his eyes never left mine. They were wild now. Shattered. He didn't care that people were watching. "Why didn't you tell me?" he rasped. Why would you do that alone?" I shrugged. "You didn't leave me much choice, did you?" "I would've." "Would've what?" I cut in, voice sharp. "Left her for me? Cancelled the wedding? Moved heaven and earth for your child? Don't lie, Ethan. You left before you even knew I was pregnant." He knelt there beside Isabelle, still staring up at me like I was a ghost. Maybe I was. Maybe the version of me he thought he owned had truly died in that hospital room. I turned to leave. He lunged up and caught my wrist. "Emily, please. Just don't go." I stared at his hand. Then I stared at him. And when I spoke, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just said, "You don't get to beg now. You had your chance, Ethan. And you spat on it." He didn't let go. So I yanked my hand free. And walked away. I made it out of the gallery, down the steps, and around the corner before my legs gave out. I leaned against a lamp post, gasping. My heart was pounding. My fingers shaking. But I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't. I'd promised myself. "Emily." A voice cut through the fog. Not Ethan's. Damian. He reached me within seconds, wrapping an arm around my shoulders and guiding me to a bench. I didn't speak. Couldn't. He sat beside me, waiting. Patient. Silent. And I broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The kind of breakdown that doesn't scream but bleeds. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a silk handkerchief. I took it wordlessly and pressed it to my face. "Let it out," Damian said softly. And I did. For the baby I never got to hold. For the love that turned into venom. For the years wasted on a man who didn't deserve a day of my breath. "I was alone," I whispered. "I was so alone." "I know," he murmured. "But you're not now." We sat like that for a long time. As the city moved on. As the sun lowered. As my tears dried. Damian never asked questions. He didn't need to. He just placed his coat around my shoulders and said, "When you're ready, let's go home." And for the first time in forever, I felt like I had won again. Meanwhile, back at the gallery, Ethan Carter stared at the gallery wall where my design glittered under the lights. He touched his cheek, still red from the slap. And then his phone buzzed. A platform notification. "Pear has declined your next design proposal." He blinked. "Pear?" He clicked the message. Realization dawned like a gut punch. Pear was Emily. All this time. Every masterpiece. Every contract. Every sky-high quote that had bled their budget. It had been her. The woman he once dismissed as just a wife. His knees buckled. He sat on the gallery floor, people walking around him like he didn't exist. And maybe now he didn't. I thought Ethan Carter was done. After the gallery confrontation, after the slap, after the truth about the child. Surely even a man like him would finally sit down in his guilt and leave me be. But I had forgotten one important detail. Ethan Carter hated losing more than he hated lying. So he decided to win, even if it meant waging war against a ghost. The summons arrived on a quiet Thursday. I was in my studio barefoot, sketching a cuff bracelet shaped like breaking waves. The courier buzzed twice, then left the manila envelope on the doorstep. I opened it absently, sipping jasmine tea. Then I read the top line. "Filing for custody, Ethan Carter versus Emily Carter. To establish paternity and joint guardianship of the child in question." I stared at the page. Then I laughed. Not a fragile laugh. A sharp, incredulous one. He filed for custody? Of a child who no longer existed? Either he was delusional or desperate. Probably both. I handed the papers to my lawyer, Claire, a woman as sharp as a scalpel with zero tolerance for stupidity. She scanned the first few lines and muttered, "He really filed this?" I nodded, arms folded. As if he gets to play grieving father now. Claire scoffed. "Well, he's about to play with fire." We prepared the reply with precision. Attached were the certified hospital records. A medical termination at 20 weeks. A reason. emotional trauma and spousal abandonment. No surviving issue. The file also included my intake documents, blood work, recovery notes, and psychiatrist recommendations. All dated, sealed, and authenticated. We mailed it with a bow. Let him read it himself. Let him feel every page like a slap he earned. 2 days later my phone rang. Not Ethan. Not his lawyer. The hospital. Hi, Miss Carter. We just wanted to inform you that Mr. Ethan Carter contacted us directly today. He wanted to verify the termination. I paused. And we gave him the confirmation as per record access rights. I could already imagine it. Ethan sitting in some office or car or hotel suite, hearing the words spoken out loud by an emotionless administrator. Sir. The pregnancy ended at 20 weeks. Patient, Emily Carter. Reason, emotional trauma. Doctor, signed. Date, confirmed. No drama. No delay. Just fact. And sometimes facts break harder than betrayal. That evening I got a text from Damian. Turn on channel 12. Now. I clicked the TV remote. The screen cut to footage from a gala downtown. Flashing cameras. Glittering gowns. And in the middle of it, Ethan Carter. Staggering. Sweating. Clutching his chest. Paramedics rushed to him as guests gasped. The news anchor's voice chimed in. Sources say billionaire Ethan Carter collapsed outside the Grant Foundation event tonight after a suspected panic episode. I muted it. And stared. It was happening. The man who once told me to behave and be rewarded was now breaking under the weight of a truth he thought he could bury with diamonds and arrogance. Meanwhile in Haichong I was thriving. My studio was filled with light and sketches and music again. Not the sad echoey kind. Real music. Instrumentals. Just lo-fi beats that kept me company while I worked late into the night. And Damian. He stopped by one morning holding a copy of Vanity Fair magazine, its cover adorned with one of my pieces, the ocean cuff. He placed it on the table, eyes wide. You designed this? He asked. I glanced down. Yes. Why? He looked stunned. This is the piece that made me change my entire business model. I blinked. Excuse me. He picked up the magazine, flipping to an editorial spread. 3 years ago I was lost. I'd built my luxury firm around outdated trends, oversized, ostentatious pieces. Then I saw this bracelet in Milan, designed by an anonymous artist named Pear. His eyes locked onto mine. It moved me. Subtle but commanding. Graceful but fierce. I remodeled my entire international collection around that aesthetic. I never forgot it. Pause. Your Pear. I nodded. His expression didn't shift into jealousy or disbelief. It shifted into awe. You turned pain into gold, he whispered. I smiled soft this time. It was the only thing I knew how to do. The next weeks were filled with purpose. I designed like a woman possessed. Rings shaped like shattered glass fused with moonlight. Earrings molded to resemble raindrops frozen mid-fall. Pendants sculpted like blooming thorns, because even grief can blossom if you water it enough. And the world noticed. Orders poured in from Paris, Tokyo, New York. Even Vogue Atelier requested an exclusive feature on Pear, the woman who designs from the edge of storms. I declined the photoshoot, of course. Pear still needed to stay faceless. Mystery sells more than beauty. One morning I received a final notice from the court. Case dismissed. Custody denied. No child exists. I tore the letter in half and dropped it into the fireplace. Ethan's last desperate grip, gone in smoke. Let him sit in the ruins. Let him count the years he wasted chasing ghosts. That night, Damian took me to a quiet beach. No expectations. No pity. Just wind, stars, and a bottle of wine. We sat on the sand, our legs stretched out, waves crashing in the dark. Do you miss the baby? He asked gently. I stared ahead, voice quiet. I miss the idea of the baby. What was the idea? A new start, I whispered. Something untouched by lies. He reached over and took my hand. You're the new start now. Maybe I was. No longer Emily the wife. No longer Emily the wound. Just Emily. Pear. The woman who survived, stitched herself together, and turned agony into art that stunned the world. The news broke at midnight. Not with headlines. With whispers. Whispers that Isabelle Carter had gone into labor far too early, 6 weeks too early to be exact. That Ethan had been rushed from a board meeting, his face pale, his hands shaking. That the baby, his child, was born frail, quiet, and barely clinging to breath. I didn't read the full article. I didn't need to. I already knew what grief looked like. And for once I wasn't the one holding it. Damian was the one who told me the details. He entered my studio the next morning with coffee and tension written across his jaw. She gave birth early, he said softly. I looked up from my sketchpad. And the baby's alive. In an incubator. Barely. I said nothing. Not because I wasn't listening, but because I felt nothing. Not pity. Not satisfaction. Not pain. Just a dull, distant quiet, like the echo after a storm. Damian placed the coffee on the table and sat opposite me, watching my face carefully. He saw the baby, he continued. Held it for 3 seconds before the monitors started beeping. That was enough to wreck him. Good, I said, turning a page in my sketchbook. Let him feel the weight of something delicate slipping away. Later that evening it happened. It began with pounding fists on the gate. Followed by shouting. Then screaming. By the time I stepped onto the porch of my villa, Ethan was at the gate, red-eyed, disheveled, and absolutely unhinged. Emily, he roared. Open this damn gate. The security guard, whom Damian had wisely hired weeks ago, stood calmly between us, unshaken. Sir, he said, you're trespassing on private property. Leave now or I'll call the police. Where's my child? Ethan barked, gripping the bars like a caged animal. Where is she hiding my baby? I walked to the edge of the porch, arms folded. You're 2 breakdowns too late, Ethan, I said coolly. The child you abandoned is gone. The one you have is barely breathing. What more do you want? He gawked at me like I'd stabbed him. I never got to say goodbye, he whispered. You didn't deserve to. I lost everything, Emily. Then maybe you should have valued something before it broke. He let out a low, desperate groan and slammed his hand against the gate. The security guard grabbed him, and within minutes, 2 additional men arrived and escorted him off the property, still shouting. You'll always be mine, he shrieked. You can't erase me. You can't. The gate slammed shut behind him. And I didn't flinch. Damian appeared on the porch shortly after, hands in his pockets. He's going to spiral, he said softly. He already has. He nodded. But you were calm. I've practiced, I replied. Silence is the only language he never learned to speak. We stood side by side, facing the horizon. Then after a pause, Damian said something unexpected. You know, there's one thing that might make him finally let go. I turned. Oh. He looked at me, unreadable. If I married you. The silence between us stretched like silk. I blinked. That's dramatic. I'm serious, he said. He's obsessed with the idea that you still belong to him. That you're just angry, not truly gone. If I married you, he'd have no illusions left. I didn't answer. Not because I was shocked, but because part of me had already thought it. A small, dangerous part. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the villa, barefoot and restless, my thoughts colliding like drunk dancers. Marriage? To Damian? He was calm. Steady. Not controlling, not manipulative. He never demanded, never pushed. He offered. And more than that, he respected my silence. But was that enough? Or was I just tired of being hunted by a ghost? I stood by the window and watched the sea writhe under the moonlight. Somewhere, Ethan was pacing a hospital hallway, staring at a glass box that held a child too fragile to cry. Somewhere, Isabelle was waking up in a sterile room, realizing that diamonds and deception don't soften a NICU ward. And here I was free. But haunted. Not by love. By what love used to mean. I didn't give Damian an answer the next day. Or the next. But I noticed the way he didn't ask again. Didn't pressure. He just brought me coffee. Walked with me by the cliffs. Cooked dinner when I forgot to eat. He knew. That time would answer for me. And maybe, just maybe, the silence between us wasn't empty. It was a promise in waiting. Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan was unraveling. His company shares dipped for the 3rd quarter in a row. Rumors of instability leaked to the press. Anonymous sources speaking about his outbursts, missed meetings, cancelled launches. And still he couldn't stop asking. Where did she go? Not just physically. Emotionally. Mentally. Spiritually. He didn't want Emily back. He wanted control back. And the fact that I had vanished, rebuilt, thrived without him? That drove him mad. But he wasn't chasing me anymore. He was chasing the ghost of the Emily he thought he'd left shattered on a kitchen floor. That Emily was dead. I had buried her alongside our child. And the woman who stood now? She didn't beg. She designed. In the studio I started working on a new piece. It would be called Resurrected Silence. A necklace shaped like a pair of lips sealed in gold, wrapped in thorned vines. A symbol of everything I never said. Everything I never screamed. Everything I chose not to say. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's war in a whisper. And in that silence, I was building an empire. It began with thunder. Not the kind the sky makes. The kind a broken man drags to your doorstep when he's convinced the only way to be heard is to explode. The storm had rolled in from the open water, thick and low, pressing its gray palms over the cliffs of Haichong. I was in the studio finalizing a set of necklace renderings, sleek, predatory lines with opals like small, captured storms, when the intercom crackled. Miss Carter, the guard's voice came through uneasy. You need to see this. I stepped onto the covered porch with a cashmere wrap around my shoulders. The rain made veils of the world. The gate was a smeared silhouette, until lightning carved it sharp and the shape standing there leapt out of the dark. Thin. Soaked. Bald-eyed. Strapped in a vest that no sane person wears to apologize. The belt was crude and unmistakable. A ring of bulky bricks and a taped tangle of wires. A small black device trembled in his fist. I exhaled so softly I tasted salt. Of course, I muttered. Of course you would turn your heart into an ultimatum. He saw me and lurched to the bars, fingers white around the remote. Emily. Open the gate. The head of security, stone still beside the rain-slick keypad, took half a step forward. I lifted 2 fingers, he stopped. We had rehearsed this in theory. The mad scenario, the boundary nobody believes will ever be crossed. It was crossed now. Ethan, I called, the wind stealing half my syllables. You look like a headline. That's never a good look. Let me in. His voice scraped raw. Or I swear to God. God's not here, I cut in. And if he were, he'd be embarrassed for you. Another flash. His face stuttered with it. Rage, desperation, the flimsy plastic wrap men call resolve when it's just panic trying to look important. You don't mean any of it, he shouted. All this, leaving silence, that farce at the gallery. You're angry. I get it. I deserve it. But you're mine. You always have been. And there it is, I said to the rain. Ownership, the perfume of cowards. He swallowed. The remote shivered in his grip. Come home, he begged. We'll fix it. I'll fix it. I'll burn down the company if you want. I'll ruin every contract she signed. Please, stop calling me that. The softness of my voice surprised even me. You don't own a single syllable of me anymore. A low purr of an engine pulled up behind me. Damian's SUV, headlights off, gliding like a second storm. He stepped into the wash of rain as if it belonged to him. Linen shirt, dark slacks, sleeves pushed to strong forearms, a calm that could saw chains. 2 of his men fanned into the hedges like shadows learning choreography. He didn't look at Ethan first. He looked at me. You could. Peachy, I said. We have a guest threatening to redecorate my driveway with fireworks. Damian's eyes slid to the vest. The micro pause before he nodded told me everything. Assessment complete, distance measured, timing chosen. Ethan's gaze cut between us, deranged jealousy kindling. You, he spat. Rich trash who hides behind hired muscles and old wine. She's not yours. Damian lifted a brow, not unkind. She's not an object, which is why you keep losing her. Rain braided over the steel bars. Ethan took a step closer, the device trembling. Open the gate, he snarled. Or we end this right here. I'll do it. Will you? I asked. Or are you just hoping the threat will feel like love if you shout it louder? I love you, he said, and those 3 words staggered, drunk on their own tragedy. I love you, Emily. I was confused. Isabelle, she saved my life once. Gratitude got twisted. I thought. His voice broke. I thought I could fix it later. A hollow laugh escaped me. Later is where cowards park their guilt so they can pretend to feel generous in the present. I'll make it right. I'll remarry you. We can start over. We'll adopt. We'll do anything. You can't adopt back a heartbeat, I said. And you can't adopt back a woman who buried the last version of herself just to survive the one you broke. He shook his head, rain clinging to the edges of a man who had never learned to be wet, vulnerable, human. You're saying words that don't mean anything. You came to the gate. That means you care. It means I'm not frightened of you, I said. Which is worse. A silence. Then, like the sea itself coughed, he switched tactics. Fine. Then explain this. He dug into his breast pocket with his free hand and flung a crumpled envelope through the bars. It slapped the driveway at my feet, bleeding ink in the rain. I didn't look down. I didn't need to. I knew what he had brought, what he had planned to weaponize. But if we were trading artifacts, I had better ones. I lifted my chin to Damian. Can you get the folder in my right desk drawer? He didn't ask which one. He knows how my mind files rage. 30 seconds later he placed the weatherproof sleeve into my palm like a ritual object. Inside, the photos Isabelle had DM'd to me months ago. A smug, pornographic parade of betrayal disguised as victory. I'd saved them in a fit of clairvoyance. There is utility in documenting a rot that swears it smells like roses. I slid the photos out and with a flex of my wrist sent them slicking across the brick towards the gate. The rain pasted them to the bars, each one a little window of flesh and furniture and childish triumph. Ethan stared, and the muscle in his jaw misfired. Do you remember these? I asked. She did. She captioned them with little hearts. For a woman who prides herself on taste, her fonts were cheap. His eyes moved over the pictures the way men traverse battlefields. Slow, disbelieving, turning away then being turned back by what they've done. I was drunk, he said faintly. You were awake, I corrected. And you were sober enough to archive messages from me that day without reading them. The rain made tiny rivers down the ink. My voice didn't wobble, it calcified. You're tainted, Ethan, I said clean and final, the sentence I had carried like a stone in the mouth for far too long. There's no going back. There is a sound men make when the last bridge in their mind collapses. It isn't loud. It's a collapse inward, lungs refusing, heart fumbling. The remote dipped in his hand. Damian moved. It was not dramatic. It was precise. He stepped into the beam of stormlight with a casual grace that looked like walking and wasn't, and in 2 heartbeats the world rearranged. His left hand closed over Ethan's wrist, thumb crushing the ulnar nerve. His right hand peeled the device as gently as one steals a matchbox from a child. He pivoted, kept Ethan's body angled from the belt, and handed the remote back to his man with a nod that meant 3 different safety procedures I did not need to know. The guard at the gate had already cut the power to the keypad line. A small insurance that humming things should no longer hum. Another bodyguard ghosted behind Ethan, fingers already separating wire from wire with that slow, devout patience of people who have learned their prayers. Ethan didn't fight. He sagged. Like all the pretense keeping him vertical had been wired to the same explosive, and Damian had disarmed that too. His eyes crawled up to me, terrible, childlike. Marry me, he whispered. Say it and I'll live. Say it and I'll live anyway, I said. Or don't. Your death is not a love letter, it's a tantrum with better props. He stared as if I'd just stolen a script from his mouth. And because I am honest with myself even when it's venomous, I let the meanest part of me step forward for one breath. Do you know what? I said lightly, tilting my head the way women do when they are about to set something on fire. Maybe I'll marry someone else. The words were air until Damian moved closer and turned them into architecture. He stepped to me, heat and rain and the scent of cedar, and with studied ease he drew me into the shelter of his chest. Consider it done, he murmured against my hairline and pressed a kiss to my forehead. Small, sure, a seal rather than a brand. Ethan made a sound like a cathedral swallowing its bells. His knees buckled. The guard caught him on reflex. For a half-second I hated the tenderness of that reflex, and then I was tired of hating anything. Easy, Damian said to the men, the same tone he used for storms and business and skittish cats. Get the vest off. Ambulance on standby, non-sirened. No press. They moved, clean and quiet. Wires eased from soaked fabric, little red lights dead as gnats. The belt came away at last and was cradled like a sleeping snake. Someone slipped a thermal blanket around Ethan's shoulders. His hands hung open, empty, palms up, a beggar who had never learned to ask for the right things. I looked at him, rain on my lashes, and felt nothing that could be mistaken for pity. Only the geometry of closure. Some stories don't end with thunder. They end when you put down a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying in your teeth. You did this to yourself, I said, not unkind. And then you tried to gift wrap it as devotion. His lips shaped my name, but the wind ate it. Take him, Damian said, and the gate opened a hand's width, only enough for a stretcher to slip through dignity. The men worked like a hinge. In 30 seconds the driveway was a wet stage again with the props cleared. Damian's chest rose against my cheek. It felt like land after a bad sea. You okay? He asked. I was born okay, I said. I just forgot for a while. He huffed a laugh, the kind that sounds like a promise not to laugh when you don't want him to. His palm fit at the nape of my neck, warm, present, not possessive. We went inside while the world outside remembered how to be only rain. In the foyer the hush arrived like a caretaker. I dropped the cashmere on the console table and slid the portfolio of designs back into place. My hands were steady. That felt like a revolution. Damian turned the dimmer up 2 notches. Soft gold light pooled on hardwood. He won't stop easily, he said. Not a warning. An observation you build plans around. I know, I said. He has to learn that echo isn't an audience. He inclined his head, amused and a little reverent. Marrying someone else would make that lesson permanent. I said, non-committal on purpose. He didn't push. That's the thing about a man who isn't trying to own you. He can leave desire on the table without eating it first. A stretch of quiet unfurled. It wasn't empty. It was occupied by things that arrive without fanfare. Safety, the option to laugh later, the right to choose a future without making it a weapon. Thank you, I said at last. For what? His mouth curved. For blowing out a match before it could pretend to be a sunrise. He nodded once, serious suddenly. He almost rewrote your life tonight with a cheap noun. I don't let that happen to things I consider art. I'm not art, I said. He looked at me like I was arguing with gravity. You're the reason we invented it. I rolled my eyes because anything else would have been surrender. Careful, Mr. Price. Lines like that make women believe in permanent verbs. Only if they want to, he said. Only when they write them too. The rain backed down the windows like a curtain deciding to be a wall again. Somewhere far down the private road a quiet ambulance slipped past the last camera. I went back to my desk, pulled the opal sketch to the top and sharpened my pencil. Damian sat on the edge of the sofa like he'd practiced being furniture long enough to do it with elegance. The house exhaled us into itself. I drew. I didn't shake. And under the mirror-bladed hush of what had almost been a tragedy, a design grew, opal set in a cradle of platinum thorns that never touched the stone. Practed. Fierce. Untouched by the thing that encircled it. I named it Unbombed Heart in my head and smiled at my own little blasphemy. An hour later the security chief pinged my phone. All clear. Device inert. Subject taken. No press. I sent back a single checkmark. Damian rose, came to my desk and leaned his hip against it, watching the lines turn into a language. You meant it, he asked softly after a while. What you said. Maybe you'll marry someone else. I didn't look up. Maybe I'll marry no one. He nodded like a man who could love a fortress without wanting to be the gate. Either way, he said, I'll be here. Not at the door. In the neighborhood. That's convenient, I said, dry as good gin. Short delivery times. He laughed under his breath. Exactly. Lightning blinked one last time and retired. The storm had dropped all its weapons and gone to sulk in the ocean's pocket. I capped my pencil, finally looked up and found him closer than I'd planned. He didn't touch me. I stepped into him anyway. The barest lean, a permission that felt like oxygen you decide to breathe because you're done proving you can hold it. Get some sleep, he murmured. Bossy, I said. Tempted, he answered. Good night, Damian. Good night, Emily. He left the way rain stops, without a door slam, without applause, just a world that's suddenly easier to stand in. I turned off the lights. The house at last went back to being a house. Outside, the driveway shone clean as if thunder had been only rumor. And somewhere in this city, A man who had tried to sell me catastrophe as commitment lay under hospital fluorescence, learning the first lesson of a life he might yet have, if he let go of the one he kept detonating. I brushed a palm over the opal sketch and whispered the sentence that had finally fit my mouth like it had been made for me. You're tainted. There's no going back. Not for him. Not for who I used to be. Only forward. Only fireproof. They say no one really sees you until you let them. But what they don't say is this. Sometimes someone has already been watching long before you even knew you were worth seeing. That someone for me was Damian Price. The morning after Ethan's unhinged breakdown, Haichong was eerily quiet. The sun climbed over the bay with the kind of cautious light that arrives after trauma, as though it wasn't sure whether to wake the world or let it sleep off its regret. I stood barefoot on my terrace sipping iced lavender tea. My studio behind me still smelled faintly of graphite, platinum dust and jasmine oil, a blend I'd come to associate with peace. I hadn't seen Damian since the stormy showdown. He'd disappeared the moment I was safe, like a bodyguard slipping into the shadows after guarding royalty. But today he knocked. Not called. Not texted. He knocked. I opened the door to find him standing there, looking impossibly composed in an ash-gray blazer, sleeves rolled just enough to show a whisper of forearm, no tie, just confidence and a gaze that held 1,000 unsaid things. Coffee? He asked. I lifted an eyebrow. You didn't come here to ask for coffee. He smirked. True. I came to tell you something. I stepped aside. It better be good. The bar's set somewhere between emotionally devastating and explosively dramatic. He chuckled and walked in like he belonged, which at this point he almost did. We sat by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the sea. I waited. Damian didn't rush. I have a story, he said at last. One that begins 10 years ago in Florence. That made me pause. Florence. He nodded. There was an exhibit at a small artisan fair. Most of the booths were predictable, gaudy, overpriced, screaming for buyers. But there was one display that was different. Small, elegant, minimalistic. The booth said Pear. No face, no history, just a signature. And in the center, on a velvet slab, there was a single ring. I blinked. The sea glass knotted ring. He looked at me with quiet astonishment. You remember. I remember designing it with a fever from the flu and tears in my eyes, I said softly. It was the first piece I made after my mother passed. Damian nodded. I bought it. You've what? I didn't know who Pear was. Didn't even care at the time. I just knew it was the first thing I'd seen that didn't try to prove anything. It just existed unapologetically. Like it didn't need anyone to understand it. I sat stunned. All these years, I whispered. That ring. He nodded. It sits in my home office. Reminds me every day why subtlety is more dangerous than volume. My throat tightened. He had known. Or maybe not my name but my essence. Long before Ethan ever learned to pronounce my worth. You were the first, I said. To buy from Pear. Maybe, he said. But I was definitely the first to feel Pear. And just like that something shifted between us. Not romance. Not yet. Respect. Recognition. That sacred moment when someone looks you in the eye and says, I saw you before the world did. We fell into an easy rhythm again over the next few days. Morning coffees turned into brunches. Brunches into late afternoon sketch sessions. Damian never pried, never demanded explanations for my silences. He simply existed beside them. And I let him. Which was a far greater act of trust than I ever imagined I'd grant a man again. Meanwhile, the world outside buzzed with chaos. Ethan had vanished from public life. Anderson Corp's board issued a temporary leave statement citing health reasons. Isabelle was reportedly still hospitalized, too traumatized to speak publicly. The child, fragile, premature, remained in an ICU unit tucked behind bulletproof glass and high-security whispers. The media speculated. But I stayed silent. Pear, however, did not. I released a new collection titled, Ashes and Opals. Every piece dripped with restraint and defiance. Burnt golds, cracked quartz, twisted diamonds that resembled resurrection scars. It sold out in hours. Every critic said the same thing. This isn't jewelry. It's autobiography. They weren't wrong. But they weren't right either. It wasn't just my story. It was every woman who'd been abandoned, underestimated, rewritten in someone else's narrative, then came back glittering, sharp, and untouchable. One night, after a press call and 3 glasses of rose, I found myself on Damian's balcony. He had a record playing, a sultry old jazz tune that sounded like dusk being painted onto glass. I leaned against the railing, the sea murmuring below, and asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Why haven't you ever asked me out?" He didn't even look surprised. "I thought I did," he said. "You didn't." He smiled faintly. "Because I wasn't sure if I was offering you a partnership or a rescue. And I know you'd rather drown than be rescued." I laughed, dry and honest. "You're not wrong." Pause. Then I turned. "But now," he said, taking a slow step toward me, "I think you've already saved yourself. And I'd like to be the man who gets to witness what you do with that freedom." My heart didn't pound. It settled, like it had finally found a chair it wasn't afraid would break. "I'm not ready to be loved," I admitted. "Then let me admire you until you are." We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. Some connections don't begin with lips. They begin with presence. And Damian had mastered that long before I knew how to be held without being caged. A week later, an exclusive exposé titled, "The Fall of the Carters: Power, Infidelity, and the Woman Who Walked Away," dropped on every major digital outlet. The article didn't mention Pear by name. But it didn't have to. The world had started to draw its own conclusions. And I let them. Because for the first time I was no longer hiding from the past. I was building towers from its wreckage. One sketch, one piece, one boundary at a time. There was no press release. No fireworks, no headlines. Just a quiet statement from the Anderson Family Trust, buried in a finance column between a failing pharmaceutical merger and grain import statistics. As of this quarter, Mr. Ethan Carter will no longer hold any executive power within Anderson Corporation. The board and his father, Gerald Carter, have jointly decided to divest all responsibilities from Mr. Carter due to personal misconduct and failure to uphold fiduciary obligations. The euphemism was generous. What it didn't say was that Gerald Carter had stormed into his son's hospital suite 2 weeks after Ethan's public meltdown, tossed the family signet ring onto the sterile tiles and spat, "You were given everything. And you managed to disgrace all of it." Ethan had begged, cried even. But Gerald Carter wasn't the sort of man to tolerate madness, especially the kind that brought live explosives to a woman's home. The scandal had made its way to whispers in country clubs and cigar lounges around the globe. Billionaires don't forgive headlines that affect their stock. Ethan was finished. But he wasn't the only one. Isabelle's fall was faster. More public. And somehow far more humiliating. It began with a leaked university transcript. Or rather the absence of one. A tenacious journalist investigating Pear's meteoric rise had stumbled upon a discrepancy in Isabelle's education. A doctorate in industrial design from a prestigious German institute that, upon inquiry, claimed she'd never enrolled, let alone graduated. Within 48 hours, multiple design institutions issued statements denying any association with her work. A week later, Isabelle was arrested for forging academic credentials to secure her position at Anderson Corp. She posted bail, vanished from the public eye, and was last spotted boarding a one-way flight to Prague under her maiden name. Anderson Corp tried to survive. Tried rebranding. Tried new designers. Even tried AI-generated jewelry mock-ups with synthetic Pear-like aesthetics. It failed. Spectacularly. The irony? Pear had never once claimed the throne they were all chasing. Pear didn't even speak. Pear designed. And the world noticed. By winter I was everywhere and nowhere. Tokyo. Paris. Sao Paulo. Not as Emily Carter. Not even as Pear. But as whispers behind some of the most elite, quietly iconic collections of the decade. I didn't sit for interviews. I didn't post selfies. I didn't make motivational videos about surviving betrayal. I created. And lived. That was all. Back in Haichong, I remained in my villa by the sea. The house was quieter now. Not in a lonely way but in a complete one. The kind of quiet that says, "You earned this." My studio was full of sketches, samples, prototypes. But more than that, it was full of peace. And Damian. Always Damian. He never moved in. Never pressed for more. He simply existed next to my life like gravity, Undeniable, grounding, and necessary without demanding credit. He understood that I didn't want someone to rebuild me. I wanted someone who wouldn't flinch when I rebuilt myself. One evening, as the sea blushed rose gold and gulls danced like scribbles in the sky, Damian walked into my studio holding a small velvet box. I looked up from a set of earrings I was refining, amused. "You better not say what I think you're about to say." He grinned. "Define what you think I'm about to say. If there's a forever speech involved, I might throw this gemstone at you." He chuckled, opened the box, and inside was not a ring, but a single gold safety pin. Elegant. Minimal. Beautifully useless in function but perfect in symbolism. "What is this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He stepped closer. "A promise." I blinked. "Not to cage you. Not to save you. Just to guard the perimeter." Quietly. Fiercely. With respect. I stared at the pin. Then at him. "Who proposes with a safety pin?" I asked. "A man who understands that you already put yourself back together," he said. "This is just so the world knows I'm your personal firewall." The laugh that left my chest was sharp and wet with something unshed. "You know I'm never wearing a veil, right?" "I'd be worried if you did," he said. "You're a queen, Emily. Queens wear crowns, not veils." We didn't tell anyone. There was no guest list. No aisle, no orchestra. Just a dock. 2 chairs. And the sound of the ocean composing its own vows in the background. The sky was embarrassingly perfect. Sunset filtered through sea haze and pink clouds, like someone had photoshopped the world for romance. I wore white linen and bare feet. Damian wore a smirk and a pearl pin. He didn't say, "I do." He said, "I will. As long as you let me." I didn't say, "I take you." I said, "I'm not giving anything away. But you can stay as long as you don't try to own it." We exchanged nothing but eye contact and a shared understanding that this silent alliance built on wounds and wonder, was ours. Not perfect. Not loud. But real. And real is rare. After he kissed my hand instead of my lips, we watched the sea turn ink dark together. No one clapped. No one posted pictures. And for the first time in years I felt free enough to cry without needing to hide. Ethan. The last I heard, he'd checked himself into a private psychiatric retreat in Sweden. He refused visitors. Didn't answer calls. Occasionally painted angry portraits of Isabelle that no one bought. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not because I was heartless. But because sympathy is something you reserve for those who stumble. Not those who burn your house down, hand you the match, then beg you to warm their hands by the ashes. He didn't just lose a company. He lost the story he thought he'd written me into. No. Now I write my own. In sketches. In silence. In gold. My name is Emily Carter. No longer his wife. No longer their victim. Not a second choice. Not a forgotten muse. But a woman who lived. Lost. And built a kingdom from everything they tried to bury her under. I don't reign with vengeance. I reign with elegance. Because the best revenge isn't a crown. It's peace. And baby, peace fits like diamonds. The end.